In the year 1958, an ethologist by the name of John Calhoun started a series of tests in which he placed groups of rats in an enclosed environment. He ensured their physical safety and supplied them with an unlimited amount of food and water. He monitored them until the population reached critical levels, eventually leading to decline. And as I began thinking and researching the topic and trying to find the similarities in American society today, I finally began to see that, to a certain extent, our society and the world is reaching an unsustainable population density. And as early as the late 1900s, scholars had already predicted these effects. In his 1798 book, An Essay on the Principle of Population, Malthus observed that an increase in a nation's food production improved the well-being of the populace, but the improvement was temporary because it led to population growth, which in turn restored the original per capita production level. In other words, humans had a propensity to utilize abundance for population growth rather than for maintaining a high standard of living, a view that has become known as the Malthusian trap. Populations had a tendency to grow until the lower class suffered hardship, want, and greater susceptibility to famine, disease, and crime, a view that is sometimes referred to as a Malthusian catastrophe. There have been absolutely no limits placed on individual people that lack the capacity to properly raise children, and since the 1960s, we have subsidized single motherhood, and this has caused widespread social instability and has robbed a few generations of the chance at a normal childhood. And as excess males pour through international borders in the hundreds of thousands, causing even more strain on already strained gender dynamics and social systems, we can see things are only going to get much worse. When Germany foolishly opened its borders, and as Arab countries open up their proverbial mother's basements, they were flooded with young military-age males of different cultures and ethnicities. Their open arms and friendly reception gift was returned with thousands of sexual assaults on these naive women. I'm pretty sure they are slowly but surely going to regret this decision. It will be it will cause great civil strife for many hundreds of years as they are eventually conquered. The remaining ones will form gangs and will cling to their nationalism, which they had long since forgotten. Once harmonious societies are now filled with fear, apathy, and suspicion of thy neighbor. After the conclusion of the experiment, John discovered categorized unusual behavior in the rat population. Eventually, the rat population reached what he described as total behavioral sink, and certain pathological activities manifested due to the stress involved in such high population densities. We are witnessing more ominous societal behavior increasing year after year: gang warfare, suicide by cops, rioting, looting, mass migration, homelessness, drug use, psychopathy, apathy, neglect, and violence. We can see pockets of these societal change all across America. Here are some examples of these behavior sinks that were observed. Pansexuality and paraphilia is now the new normal, as hardcore pornography has become more and more accessible due to the proliferation of cell phone technology. It is easier than ever to view anything sexual one can imagine. We see examples such as extreme fetishes, homosexuality, and bisexuality becoming very commonplace. These rats didn't compete for status, but would rather attempt to mate with anything regardless of gender or age. The dating game in America is becoming more toxic and polarized than ever. Many colleges and large co-ed institutions suffer from explosions in rape, sexual assaults, and drink lacing, etc. Somnambulism rats, are more colloquially titled the beautiful ones, are described as fat, sleek, and healthy. They didn't engage in socializing, only grooming and sleeping and going out for food during the night. There are vast groups of men and women that see the futility in today's toxic society of ever finding a mate. They don't make enough money or don't have any practice or even the desire to attract mates and raise children. They are largely ignored by the general population. The most alarming pathological behavior was from the probes. These rats would viciously pursue females in heat, following them into their burrows, slaughtering their babies, and creating havoc in the brood. The dominant males would do their best to protect their habitat from other males, but would eventually succumb to wounds or exhaustion. The females would neglect their babies, and infant mortality surged. As more and more population enters this country from everywhere else, the supply of jobs with livable wages is rapidly drying up, which is the metaphorical feeding pen in our society. As as women dominate more and more of these important careers, which are vital for the nuclear family structure, this creates more and more abnormal behavior in women and men. Women being tired of this hypersexual environment where the most beautiful women are constantly sexually pursued, they retreat to their homes and stay in packs for protection. Seemingly, we are entering a time when many are left out. However, what if only cognitively challenged people are the only ones breeding, or people from other countries are breeding at your expense? And as the world becomes more and more multicultural and multiracial, these problems will reach an astronomical level. We have clear evidence of a broken family and support structure which had to be subsidized with very impersonal and unhealthy and ineffectual social services. A new generation with personality disorders and other psychological problems thrust into a world that doesn't care and stops for nothing. Violence in our school system and society at large has reached unprecedented levels, and this is a sum of the totality of these events. Mixing schools together with a bunch of strangers will cause hyper-fluctuating outputs, polar extremes, where those at the bottom lash out and those at the top reject those deemed genetically inferior with extreme vitriol and disdain. When societies are homogenous, there is no one to exclude. A good example is the toxic environment in Aurora, Colorado, Columbine High School, where 2 boys shot up the school. In 2018, I spent several months in Portland, Oregon, and in my personal opinion, this is ground zero for the coming future in most cities in America. People have become parasites in their own cities, sleeping amongst empty shells of the postmodern age. I could see the streets filled with examples of behavioral sink, rampant homelessness, which our society no longer has the ability or even desire to fully solve. Parasitic multi-billionaires preach at us from their ivory towers while society crumbles. Single mothers and children alone and afraid walking the streets. Dubious cloaked men prowling alone at all times of the night, who wouldn't hesitate to rape and steal if the opportunity was there. Mental illness was rampant. Grime, disease, and filth was everywhere. Young, attractive, healthy women surrounded by a group of beta males while they huddled in fear together under a Portland bridge. Office spaces were entirely staffed by females as they watched from windows, looking down at the lunatic asylum on the streets. Purse snatchers, sexual deviants, and criminals, and just good old-fashioned scum were common. Police are more militarized, but even more ineffectual and tolerant than ever. Homelessness was at one point a male problem, but is rapidly becoming a female problem. And not just older, discarded females, but young, vulnerable ones too. The list goes on and on. Tolerance and apathy are the virtues of a dying society. There was no culture, but a pseudo-culture. Nothing defined anyone. We were strangers in a strange world, surrounded by strangers acting strangely. I wouldn't even call it Gotham City, because at least they had a Batman. Here in America, we are often referred to as a melting pot of a country, but this just simply isn't the case anymore. I refer to it as a boiling pot. Our rents are always rising, and pay never matches. Constant racial relation issues and overall Orwellian dystopian vibe. It's enough to poison the mind of even the most hopeful. We are in unprecedented times, and it's easy to make assumptions that our society and perhaps the world will collapse in the next 100 years. Perhaps this can be delayed for a short while from our close allies and the occasional rational voice blip and the millions of other opinions. Eventually, as we have seen time and time again in human history, roving bands of men hell-bent on finding mates and dominance will be our downfall. And at what point do we start bombing our own country? Is there anything stopping this? The thin blue line is a term used to describe our sacred law enforcement institutions who are becoming stretched to their absolute capacity, it seems. Over our history, we have seen our once friendly, approachable police officers turn into a highly effective military force that quickly dispatches our dregs with extreme prejudice. Our prisons went from a local jail holding a few drunks to vast warehouses for the souls of the damned, redeemed, and everything in between. In these microcosms, we see that men quickly separate into their various tribes they identify with. The only commonality they have is the pigment of their skin and a vague attachment to some location around the globe. I believe that our government has come to the same conclusion a long time ago, but I guess they forgot to send us the damn email. And when the rank and file of honorable, brave men with high moral codes dwindles to zero and is replaced with beta men, women, rapists, corruption, and rot, well, there will be chaos on the streets, and no one will trust them. And if our rapidly devaluing currency and crippling debt destroys our economy, it will only be a matter of weeks or months before the military implodes. Men will return home to their wives and families to make do as best they can. Pockets of Chicago, New York, Portland, Los Angeles come to mind. And for those unfortunate souls who have no idea what this country was like before its downfall, I both envy you and feel sadness for you. So, Mr. Morgan, I believe you. Now what do I do? Firstly, know what type of rat you may actually be in this new world. If you're doing fine and thriving still, then outstanding. Hug and love your child and partner and remind yourself daily how blessed you are. Be sure to arm and train yourself because psychopaths walk amongst us and strike without warning or provocation. If you see your chances at mating are very limited, that's okay. You can always improve yourself and hopefully succeed, or enjoy your life and realize that you can be a part of the solution and not the problem. If you feel that things are spiraling out of control and want to lash out, don't. If you can't control around you, you must become able to control yourself. Most importantly is to not lose hope. Don't let the blackness of reality cloud your vision. Try your best every day to do some decent deed, and hopefully they will do another decent deed in return. And to those that do harm to others, then I hope your soul burns in hell. In his most important scientific article, John wrote, I shall largely speak of mice, but my thoughts are on man, on healing, on life and its evolution. Threatening life and evolution are the two deaths, death of the spirit and death of the body. Is our spirit dying? Is our body dead? No, not yet. We can still turn things around, but I won't get my hopes up. This is Matthew Morgan. I appreciate you listening. Always be thinking, and until next time, stay safe, stay frosty.